All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Holy Ourselves podcast, where we explore what it looks like to be whole before God, ourselves, and others in the midst of this crazy world. And I am joined today by a wonderful friend that I have we've just started getting to know each other, I feel like, over the last year, maybe even less than that. But Keith Wildenberg. Hi, Keith.
Hello, Josh.
It's so great. It's so funny. I had heard of you from people, namely Grant Hartley, for a moment, and I didn't know who you were. And then even when you guys put together Building Catholic Futures, but then when we saw each other earlier this year?
Yeah, it was February
That's crazy.
when we first met in person.
When we first met in person, and I've just enjoyed getting to know you so much since then. But could you, for our guests who maybe don't know you, I know you are the co-founder of Building Catholic Futures with Eve Tushnett, who I've gotten to talk with her on Life on Side B, but would love for you to share a little bit about yourself for our guests and for our listeners, and about what you do.
Yep. Well, I'm a proud baby boomer.
Okay.
Because I was born in December of 1964, and so that was the last month of the baby boom.
Oh my gosh.
But where I'm coming from, I guess, with respect to LGBT stuff and integrating with faith, when I first met Eve, she made the comment that I've never met someone like you who has come from the environment that you came from. And that environment was the Diocese of Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the 1960s and 70s, when the church was the one place where you felt safe.
Yeah.
The church was the one place where you felt safe, because you couldn't be openly gay in the workplace. You couldn't be openly gay among family and friends. But at church, with God, and with small circles of friends, you could be. And so when I came out, when I was in high school, these were the days when you came out as gay or lesbian and immediately got pigeonholed into, well, you're probably called to be a priest. Because in the Catholic tradition, we have just these long traditions of celibate holiness and all of this stuff. And so I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a lot of wonderful mentors and teachers and priests and sisters who just encouraged me in my faith. And so it was very, very natural to be gay and Catholic. And so when I hooked up with Eve, it surprised her, because the title of her first book was Gay and Catholic. And it's all about like trying to reconcile those two. But for me, it was always natural.
That's so amazing. Oh my gosh. That is something that I've noticed. So, I've joked with you and Eve. I'm like I desire to be, I'm like right there.
Come home to Rome, baby.
but I'm not there. But I'm so right there. And I've appreciated getting to know so much of the Catholic faith. And I listened to that podcast called Plague, about the Catholic Church and the AIDS crisis and everything. If you haven't heard it, it's great. It's
that was Michael O'Loughlin's, based on his book Hidden Mercies, or rather, his book Hidden Mercies. I think he did after he did the podcast.
Yeah, probably. I think so. Yeah. But it was just, I think what I appreciated about it is, like, as I've learned about LGBTQ people's experience with Catholicism, is it's much more layered and different. And like what you're talking about for your experience, and then Eve and all of these things, it can be, it sometimes feels like the divide is sometimes very hard for Protestants, where there's this clear cut like divide. I don't know, but I feel like I hear this diverse experience within Catholicism. You can correct me if you feel like I'm wrong, but
No, no, no. That's it's the more I get to know Protestants, the more I get to find that, or I should say, LGBT Protestants.
Yeah.
The more I find that one of the things that that you guys struggle with that we don't so much is the fact that one man, one woman marriage is like the ideal for everyone in some
Hmm.
Protestant communities.
Yeah. Hmm.
Whereas for Catholics, the idea of marriage, of course, is important because
Yeah.
it's part of the Christian tradition. It's also part of the human tradition,
Yes.
um, and and so we have, we have our whole natural law theology and all of this that promotes marriage. But at the same time, marriage has always existed as one option of many.
Hmm.
And these other, sometimes much less noticed vocations, things like intentional community and covenant friendships and religious communities, monasteries and convents, and um,
Yeah.
you
There
know,
are options. There are
yeah,
things, there are other ways of living it out, which I feel like in Protestantism, like Protestant world, that those haven't really existed at
yeah.
all. So there's been a
A
lot of
lot of them
borrowing.
kind of get a lot of them get a start,
Yeah.
and some of them sustain. But
Yeah.
the there's there's not a lot of room in some Protestant spaces to plug folks who don't fit the usual mold. Whereas in
Yeah.
Catholic spaces, well, there are whole books of canon law that govern things like intentional communities and vows we make
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
this
which
sort
I
of,
think lends to that flex, like that kind of nuance and differing vocations that then what I was trying to explain before that I've noticed of the ways that it is not so clear cut and dry as it is in Protestant world where it's like you have marriage and that is the way that you go because there is no imagination really. There's beginning to be more. Um, See, we could talk about this the entire time, probably easily. But I would love for you to talk about your work with Building Catholic Futures. I know we're going to talk a bit about formation and whatever else we get to here, but you guys are doing some really cool work at Building Catholic Futures, and especially with these frameworks and this kind of stuff you've been developing. So I'd love if you could just kind of lay that out for us.
okay. The just quickly, building Catholic Futures was Eve and I were working buildingcatholic.org.
Okay, yes.
Um,
It'll be in the show notes, everyone.
Excellent. The Eve and I were working on two separate projects. My project was centered around the idea of why aren't there more gay Christians evangelizing gay Christians?
Mm,
Why aren't gay Christians out there on the forefront of evangelization? Instead, we consider ourselves too often, or our churches consider ourselves the objects of ministry.
yeah.
So I was thinking about how to build that. So I contacted Eve and asked, what, you're the only person in the Catholic world who's really written about how to be openly and proudly gay and Catholic. And she said, "Oh, I'm working on another project. It's kind of springing from the idea of what if our institutions that deal with the next generation, Catholic schools and all of this, what if a kid would graduate eighth grade from a Catholic school, knowing full well that there's a place for people like him or people like her in the Catholic Church?" And so that's why we called the organization Building Catholic Futures, because the idea was people people at the moment are lacking imagination.
Yeah.
They're lacking the ability to conceive of, oh, this is what a thriving future looks like for a gay person, a lesbian person, a trans person as a Catholic.
Hmm.
So we came together, 10 of us from various various places around the country who are passionate about these things. And that was what the fall of 2023. And we brainstormed essentially what these frameworks might look like.
Yeah.
And where the need was. And so what we outlined like 10 different projects that we could work on. But eventually from that, Eve and I, about a year later, sat down and compiled all of this stuff into various frameworks, because what we found was people need language.
Yes.
You know, it's that when I say lack of imagination, I don't mean lack of, I don't mean that they're boring. I mean that pastoral ministers, straight ones, but also gay ones, we are handed like these tiny sets of language to use to talk about our experience and to talk about our coming closer to Jesus and coming closer to the church and moving along in sexual integrity. And the language is smaller than the experience.
Yes. 100%. I agree. I just to jump in and say, like, I think it's so much of what we're doing in this kind of work of sexuality and faith is there's like been building these small frameworks, you know, and whether it's the sides language or whether it's like how you deal with identity or belief or behavior, like however it is. And then I think what you're talking about is like the imagination to see the other aspects of like the diamond that, you know, like we've honed in on these corners that are important, but then you see that there's other parts that we've just not gained the language. And so it's like you guys are putting together language for these other pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. And so it's language that in many cases we borrowed. But in most cases, after 10 or 20 drafts of going through, we changed the language because, not because the language of some of the thinkers that went before was wrong, but their project was often very different.
Yeah.
And so our project was, what do sexual and gender minorities need in terms of descriptions of their journeys of discipleship? What do they need to take the next right step in the direction toward holiness?
Yeah.
And the trouble with making frameworks like this is you've got to establish a balance between what Eve and I call being too Procrustean or being too Talmudic.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that, you know, is these are two really good words, but Procrustean is like taking a framework and then saying, okay, where do I fit? So it's like I lived in Italy for much of my adult life, and the Italians just love astrology.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh,
I still
yes.
haven't gotten to go to Italy, so I don't know.
Yeah. So when you're at a party in America, everybody asks you, oh, what do you do? When you're at a party in Italy, it's all like, ooh, you're a Sagittarius. You must be a visionary. You know, so
granted, that sounds like a few parties I've been at here in Florida, but you know, I get asked my zodiac probably before my work, but still the same is true. But I do hear what you're saying is like you can have these frameworks and you can so build yourself into it. And I feel like we do this with a lot of different frameworks. Like the Enneagram has become one of these. Like I've used Enneagram in spiritual direction, and I'm always telling people it's not that this fits perfectly. Sometimes it's helpful for you to understand like the desires that motivate you, and it gives language as you're talking about, but it's not like putting you in a box of understanding, but it's just giving more language of what you're doing. Like that's Yes. So I hear you. Keep going.
Yeah, so that's the tendency to be procrustean, is to just jam yourself into that box. On the other hand, there's the tendency to be really Talmudic. With Enneagram has that
Yeah.
hint as well, where it's like, well, I'm the kind of three that, you know, that I also take a
Goes.
lot from an eight. And
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. It flows all over the place to the point where there's no structure at all. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what we've done though in assembling these frameworks, we've pulled them into what we call our Journeys curriculum, which is a week long workshop that's really content intensive, which goes through all of these frameworks that describe the various spiritual journeys of sex and gender minorities that Eve and I have experienced among the folks who we have accompanied, and such. But the nice thing about the frameworks is that they also lend themselves to something as simple as, we'll give talks, on a certain topic, and just one element of a 10-part framework is enough for an evening worth of conversation, a talk and Q&A and discussion afterwards.
Yeah. Yes. Because similar to you guys doing this work, has been my whole work on the spiritual movements and these like
Oh,
different
yes.
spiritual movements and all of this.
I
And
read your book draft. Let me plug it.
I can't wait. Thank you to all of your help for it. But the funny part is, first of all, I joked with Eve when she wrote tenderness. I was like, thank you for writing half of my dissertation. But I think what was funny with that is I actually wrote twice as much as I was supposed to for the draft. The book ended up twice as big as it was supposed to be, as we had planned for it to be. And I've had to do a lot of cutting, which is sad. But it's true. I say that because it's like I think because this kind of work of like formation of like journeys, as you guys are talking about it, there's not a lot that's been done about it. Like I remember when I was starting my work on it, it was hard to find resources. Like it was hard. And so, and even you guys on your list, when you sent me like some of this document, I was like, there's some resources I had never read before. So now I need to like have them on my list. But I do think it then lends to the fact that it's even harder to talk about all of it because there's so much that's just never really been discussed, and you could really hone in just one area.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we share in common the influence of James Emperor. And he had
Yes.
written a book on spiritual direction and gay Catholics or gay Christians. And he had done this work back in the 70s and 80s, and published the book in the 90s, kind of thing. And it in the Catholic world, things kind of got stifled for a while, because there were signals coming out of Rome, that were basically like the phrase that they used was studied ambiguity.
What does that mean?
The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, under Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict, was very, very worried that many of the ministries who were reaching out to gay and lesbian identifying Catholics were speaking about the traditional Christian sexual ethic with studied ambiguity, meaning, well, it could really mean a lot of things.
Okay.
Yeah, the church says intrinsically disordered, but blah, 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 blah. The catechism says respect, sensitivity, and compassion, but what is just discrimination versus unjust discrimination? And these are all really, really good questions. But the signals that were coming out of the Vatican were tread very, very carefully and make sure that that what you're doing is really contributing to people's flourishing and not leading them down paths that are less healthy for people.
Yeah.
And so anyway, as a result, Catholic scholarship in the area tended to go off on, what you guys would call like the side A direction, or the queer theology direction.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the folks who were doing the real pastoral work, pastoral theology and spirituality and discipleship making, they kind of stopped writing, or rather they, went down that route or went down the route of Catholic influencing, which was also a format that fell on deaf gay ears, because Catholic influencers tended to come at it with the excitement of Pope John Paul's theology of the body. Mm-hmm. And they would typically start gay ministry with, hey, Adam, Eve, that's why God made sex. Oh, that's not you.
Yeah.
And then it would be, da-da-da-da, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And then the side A people
take
take over
at that point.
Yeah. The side A people take over. And so what you get in the middle of this chasm between these two approaches is, hey, I just want to be a better Catholic. I just want to come closer to Jesus. I just want to be part of my community. I want it to be a place where I can grow and flourish as a leader among Christians. And silence is often the easiest approach. And so again, coming back to why our frameworks have been received so positively by Catholics who do pastoral ministry, is because they have permission to break the silence. Mm. It's like, oh, I can talk about this. I can talk about the stages to gay integrity, and I can see how in receiving your story, you started out with difference, and then you moved to a secret stage, and now I'm hearing a little bit of self-defense, and here's what that looks like theologically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so let's jump into it, because I know there's so much. It's not even just like one framework you guys have developed, as you were saying. There's been like a lot of different things that you've done, and even when you were sending it to me and we were talking about what to discuss here, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about all of it, everything. Every single piece of it. But everyone, if you want that, you need to do the courses and like get connected with Building Catholic Futures. But let's talk about these 5 stages of integrity, because I thought that's one of the areas that really spoke to me. And walk us through why you chose difference as the starting point rather than something like awareness or awakening, or like what the thinking was in these stages of integrity.
The inspiration of difference is, well, okay, first, why not awakening or awareness? It's because awakening and awareness, meaning the average gay or lesbian kid identifies themselves as, oh, that's what it means. I am gay, at the age of 10. Mm. And then at the age of 16 is the average age when they come out. Now, these statistics are about a decade old, so it may be different.
Changing.
Yeah, it's constantly changing because there's certain things about the identity that keep changing. But nonetheless, as we were tracing the spiritual journeys of the people that we've accompanied, we find that these two moments, the moment of self-awareness and the moment of first coming out are really important milestones. And so we consider them like milestones, but then what you need is, okay, well, what happens before this self-awareness? So the reason we call it difference, it was Alan Downs and the book, The Velvet Rage, that first helped us articulate what that's about. Because before, I can think of my own story. I was perfectly in sync with the statistics because I was 10 years old when I had this rude awakening that, oh my gosh, I like boys. And, but before that, what was the experience? Before that, it wasn't at all a scary experience. The I like boys is a scary experience. It's a scary self-awareness but before that, it's just, I'm different. I like my books. I like my music. I don't want to play basketball, despite the fact that, at the age of 10, I may have already been 6 feet tall at the age of 10.
Oh my gosh!
I'm 6'5" as an adult.
You had me beat on the growth spurt. I was called Joshua Tree in middle school because
that's so sweet.
Yes, I was called Joshua Tree because I got onto the basketball team in middle school because I had my growth spurt suddenly, and that was the only reason I was on the basketball team. Was because I was taller than everyone. Anyway.
Yes. Whenever in the liturgical cycle the psalm sequence comes up where we sing and the just shall grow tall like cedars, I always,
there you go, we rise. I mean, I'm not tall now. I'm not as tall as you now, but I had the early growth spurt. But anyway, go on what you're saying.
It's that early period is we just call it difference because people are aware that they're different. Alan Downs makes it into a big thing because he's writing specifically about the experience of gay men, or in the case of these early stages, gay boys. It's like they just know that they're different. And Julia Sadusky and Mark Yarhouse in their I think it's their most recent book, the Emerging Sexual Identities. She talks about that as well, and she describes she because she and Mark are equal collaborators on the book. But I know Julia. I don't know Mark, so I have Julia in my head.
In your brain, I get it.
Yeah. But anyway, they talk about the experience even for gay and lesbian identifying people. They identify that different stage very much with gender. And it's true. Most of the gay guys I know were a little bit Nelly as kids, and most of the lesbians I know were a bit tomboyish, and so there is this thing, I'd rather go join the girls on that part of the playground because they're doing Barbies today.
Yeah. I do think that is an area, that initial stage is one area where gender and sexuality are very close aligned because so much of it has to do with our gender, because then your sexuality, especially as a queer person, lives out of your understanding of your gender and the gender of other people. And I don't know if this came from Alan Downs or where I heard it, but it's something I'll often use in what you're talking about with difference, is that, we all realize we're different. Everyone in the world realizes some kind of differences that we have, but what happens, I think, with queer people is when that difference can't get communicated, it gets internalized as I'm less than, or like this is a piece that then is like not the same, not as of equal value, or sets me apart in some way. Yep. Or at least that's where I start talking about when I get into shame stuff, because that
that fits very neatly into our framework as well, because you have this passage of naming your identity, And then the
Mm-hmm.
stage that now follows is secrets.
Yes.
Because even if you have a pretty healthy sense of that identity, you haven't yet developed the trust to be able to share that with other people. And so kids, it may be a short time, or it may be a long,
Oh,
long time, many, many years, and it's
yeah.
not until you're an adult that you actually come out. But
Mm-hmm.
that whole secrets stage is about how much of myself is safe to share, and
Yeah.
with whom can I share it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like sometimes going from the secret stage to coming out stage, or I think is the third stage coming out, or is it
It's self defense, and
self
coming out is the transition.
transition to it? Yeah. And I feel like that transition, unless I know some people who came out like on Instagram, on social media, and it's like they have that definitive moment they came out. Good on
As a
y'all.
boomer, I want to say that doesn't count. You've got to look them in the eye.
You have to have a conversation with your parents on a couch and have the really awkward situation of having this conversation
Yes,
face to
like it
face,
was for the rest of us.
like we had to. Um, but like yeah, there's like a transition of it because you're like still having secrets in some area of life, and then you're coming out in some, and then you get to this self defense thing, which I want to talk about that because I was so intrigued by this. So for everyone, these stage, so there's like difference, secrets, and then with self defense, I think you guys really name something that I notice a lot in working with queer people, of just like it's not just, oh, you come out and now you're accepted, like everything is great, I have it all together. Not at all how it happens. I make the joke often with people that after I came out, if I ran into you in the grocery store, you were finding out I was gay. And that was like to get out of my way. Like it was one of the move I'm gay situations. And it was a self-defense kind of thing. But you name it's a pretty messy piece. And can you talk about that? I know in it you kind of name a few different manifestations of it, but I'm just talk about that stage.
Yeah, it's messy. In fact, before we came up with the language of self defense, we called it the chaos stage, because of
Sounds
that
about right too.
messiness. But self defense, well, there were a lot of reasons why self-defense seemed more apt, but one of them is this movement from difference to secrets to self-defense, because it's about identity formation. Difference. I just know that my identity is different. Secrets then is like I've got this identity, but I have to hide it because people are going to attack it. Self-defense is now like, okay, I've come out, and I'm presenting to you, Josh, my identity. And I know full well that you might attack it. And so you walk into the grocery store and you're just ready. You're just ready
Yeah.
to get the pushback. And what makes it particularly messy is the intersection with another one of our frameworks, which is the four voices that we hear about what gay identity means. But everyone that you when you're in that messy self-defense phase, everyone that you encounter is a potential adversary, hence the self-defense, but they're also a potential mentor,
Yeah.
because you're not yet secure enough in what it means to be, let's put it in a Christian framework, to be a gay Christian. You can hear all kinds of things. Well, did you ever read this in the Bible? Did you ever think maybe, blah, 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 blah. And so you get this mix of mentors. And you can flip to one and another in the course of the same day, because you go from, in the case of a kid, you go from school to track practice to go out to a movie with friends, and
Hmm.
you've got three different sets of, three different personae that you're putting on
Yeah.
for
Hmm.
that same gay identity. And so that's why it gets messy. And so the gay identity you mentioned, or the self-defense messy identity that you mentioned, was the angry ex-Catholic.
Oh,
You
yes.
mentioned to me
Hmm.
in the show notes that it's like, yeah, that's one that we see a lot.
Hmm.
And it's what makes let's say a young adult who got confirmed. We in the Catholic Church, we confirm like high school age. So you get confirmation, and then you don't show up in church again, but you're angry about that.
Hmm.
And it's coming out of that self-defense phase, because probably during your Christian formation, you heard so many conflicting theories about why you are who you are, or why you behave how you behave, or how you look, or why you present the way you do,
Yeah.
or what have you, um, that you think those Catholics are just a bunch of deceptive freaks.
Hmm.
On the
Yeah.
other hand, you can be an angry ex-Catholic because maybe you only heard one message from the church, and all the other messages you heard were from social media, from your friends, whatever.
Hmm.
But at church, you only heard one thing, and that's
Hmm.
intrinsically disordered. Or
Yeah.
maybe you only heard one thing: Jesus loves you no matter what you do.
Hmm.
And so there's no there.
Yeah. There's nothing to grasp onto from there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Because I think the most general way I ever see this in people is like you go from this stage of being so afraid of people seeing you as gay, because or queer, or wherever in the realm, um and then in the self-defense stage, I so often see like a desire for everyone to see you as queer. Like you almost want to premeditatively put it out there before anything. And I think there's experiment to it. I've experienced too for some people, because I think it's that piece of people trying to figure out, and this might not be with like the integrity, but like when so much of your life has been in secret, you're trying to figure out, what did I put on as a piece of hiding? What did but what's actually me? And so then there becomes, but I remember in my own life, I've seen this with other people. Like sometimes it's just intentionally, wear the one shirt in a space because you just want to see how people react. And
Hmm.
and I do think there's like this angerness to it. But sometimes even for me, it was like, it wasn't always like I was angry, but there was a part of me that wanted people to have to see it, because I lived in hiding for so long that then I was like, well, now you have to. And it wasn't like, I think it was actually a lower, I think that's why Alan Downs calls it the Velvet Rage. But,
Yeah.
but,
Well, Alan
yeah.
Downs talks about compensation,
Hmm.
and how when you're out and about like that, you sort of overperform,
Yes.
and best little boy in the world kind
Hmm.
of kind of syndrome. And boy, do we as Christians have that in spades sometimes. It's like, I'm going to be the best Christian.
Hmm.
And from a Catholic tradition, I'm going to be the best Catholic because I'm all about the smells and bells, and I do Gregorian chant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes up in so many places. I think it also comes up then when you get into the queer community, and then you're like trying to be the best gay. Like you're trying to fit in. You're trying to do all of it. I remember going to queer conferences, queer Christian conferences, and you're just like, everyone's decked out in their best. You're trying to like look good. You want to fit in. You're being more queer than you maybe would be in your general life, and that's not bad. It's not a critique of it, but yeah, there's this compensation of wanting to show that you are the best, or maybe even just fit in, that I think sometimes, and it's so crazy how so below the surface it is often, at least I've noticed even in my own life. Like, it's not like this ginormously conscious thing, but it was like something that like is flowing out of you because it's just like coming from so much that's been hidden.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's part of the ritual. I mean, I mean, this is a place I think where conservative Christians and queer theorists come to, it's sort of the horseshoe. It's the horseshoe theory, but even I talk about this, how we often find a lot more resonance in queer theology than we do in like the typical Matthew Vines side A,
Yeah.
domesticity kind of thing, because the queer theology it talks about how we perform, how we ritualize, and the theology that a lot of queer Christians experience is just delight and wonderment in things like, the bones of saints and the mystery of incense and, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So the performance, when the performance is directed straight at God, like, wow, that's, I want to call it queer, but then you get into what's the definition of queer?
That could be a whole conversation in and of itself.
Yeah. We'll do this again next year and we'll have that conversation.
There we go. Yeah. I know, y'all, when Keith and I were talking about like what should we talk about, there was like a billion things that we knew we could talk about. We could talk about partnership, we could talk about the definition of queer. But I think gosh, we could go through every stage and have a billion conversations with it. And I think one of the things I'm so thankful that in these kind of frameworks you guys are putting together, like these stages of integrity, is so often kind of like what you were talking about before with the frameworks we've been given and working out of these stuff. I think there's been this kind of, there's not been a journey framework to be given of like stages you work through, and that these stages aren't bad. They are pieces of what you go through. Because I think what has happened so often is when if you're being discipled by a more maybe conservative priest or pastor or something, and they see you in that self-defense phase, they're going to come at it from this place of, you shouldn't be acting this way. You shouldn't, like, you need to stop being in this kind of situation. And maybe in a more progressive situation, it's maybe more open to, because maybe it's more seen as the liberation and the acceptance. But like, to be able to understand that these are stages that we're going through, and like, you're going to be in it, and that's okay that you're in it. And also, you're not going to always be in it. Yeah. Like, it's going to change.
Yeah.
And that's part of like the growth to wholeness.
Well, what pastoral ministers and priests are looking for is, in any particular encounter with a sex or gender minority, they're looking for, okay, what's the next good step for this person? And so having a framework like these stages along the journey, or stages to integrity, tells them, okay, like with self-defense, I mean, self-defense is long and messy and all of that stuff, but how does self-defense resolve? Self-defense resolves in owning. We use the phrase "own it." Mm-hmm. There comes a point on top of this mix of mentors when you find that one idea that really fits your experience. Maybe it's not just one of the mentors, maybe it's multiple, but what helps you cross that boundary into the next stage being solidarity, um, what helps you cross that boundary is counting the cost. It's like there's a realization that if I'm going to be really who I am called to be, who I am called to be and faithful to my own experience, I'm going to have to die to some selfishness. I'm going to have to die to some of the anger that I feel at God. You know, I'm going to have to die to my resentment because it took my mother too many years to come to grips with my sexuality. And so passing beyond now that self-defense stage and into solidarity with the rest of your community or communities, finding families of choice, starting to discern just what my call to holiness is, as opposed to what they all used to tell me my call to holiness should be. You know, what should it look like? You know, who should it be with? You know, these are the things that now we start to see real sorts of flourishing. And so in these last in the last stages, you know, solidarity then moves into a real sense of mission, where you get this sense of balance between, okay, here's what I would love to do for my community and my family and my families of choice and my parish and all of this. And now let me make some room in my heart for inspiration from the Holy Spirit. And how is the Holy Spirit tugging me in the direction of a broader mission? You know, and so when we first were developing the framework, we thought of mission as being like very, very evangelical, like always referring to the kind of missionary discipleship where you're wanting to spread the word, and so it's like gay Catholics evangelizing gay Catholics. But as we started connecting this up with people's experience, it's like, no, not everybody is called to the mission field in the same way. And so we talk about mission now more as this transition, as you make room for the Holy Spirit, there are opportunities that open up, and you just need to let the Holy Spirit tug you in the direction of doing something.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up, because it was, as you were talking, there was a question that was forming in my brain that I had not given you, that I was wondering about that understanding of mission, because, you know, similarly when Meg Botts was on the podcast a few weeks ago, we were talking about the difference between influence and leadership, and how, you know, in this era of social media world and all of this stuff, how we often conflate that with leadership kind of piece, but it's not necessarily the same. It can be a part of it, but I mean, I say this as someone who podcasts constantly, talking into a microphone. But what I was thinking through with that is how I almost could imagine where what we traditionally would think of as missions, sharing, you know, going out and sharing, doing, you know, ministry, or starting, you know, speaking out as a gay Christian, can I could imagine it almost being sometimes part of the self-defense phase, like the way of putting myself out there sometimes for some people, but like, you know, like the way that it's coming about it. But then what you're talking about is something much more holistic, that it's not necessarily, mission is not so much necessarily let me get on a platform and talk about being a gay Christian or a queer Christian or going and evangelizing to other queer people, but something much more flowing from, I have brought reconciliation between these parts of my life, and I feel very grounded and I own it, like you were talking about from the solidarity, and now being able to like pour out from that. Whereas I think what I was talking about with the mission of like the speaking from self-defense is, it's almost like because I've done it, and I feel like other people have done it, where you like you speak more because like you're hoping that by talking about it you'll believe it too, kind of thing. This thing that I think that's what happens sometimes in self-defense area. But what, yeah, so what I hear you talking about is more of like when as I have that in me, then I can share it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a another framework. Our
See, I love all the framework. We just got
yeah, yeah.
y'all. You need to connect with Billy Cog Futures to get all the
Yeah,
frameworks.
gay charisms, but there's this is a borrowed framework, borrowed and adapted from our friends at the Siena Institute and the works of Sherry Weddle, who's a Catholic evangelist, and she's developed a couple of different frameworks, but the called and gifted one makes distinctions between how it is that we move about in the mission field. And so when you discern, or the process of discerning, is this thing that I'm really good at, is this a gift of the Holy Spirit, or is this a talent that I'm really good at? Or is this simply something that I that I need to get better at, kind of thing? And I'll use a simple example is music. My musicianship, sometimes it's a gift of the Holy Spirit. There are times when during the Mass we are singing and there's this just, I know I'm ministering. I know because I can feel the presence of God and I don't even know that I'm there.
Yeah.
But that's rare for me. I really got to work at it. So I've developed a modicum of talent. And the key in discerning vocations is there are things that really are gifts. And, the biggest one that I've discerned is evangelization. And the reason that that a gift is a gift and not just a talent is because you hear it back. Yeah. You see it in the lives of other people. You don't see it in your own life, So I need people to evangelize me all the time. But what I see is, sometimes years later, I'll run into someone that I had met once, years before. And they'll say, thank you for that conversation because you convinced me of, or you opened up all these questions. And it took me 5 years to get back to you, but, come up with the answers. But that's a sign to me that that the Holy Spirit has given me the gift of evangelization. Yeah. It's not that I think that I'm good at it or that people tell me that I'm good at it. It's that the evidence is manifest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it comes from both the calling of the things that are working and all of these things. Okay, like I said, we could be here for ages. And I have a lot to add that I want to ask you, and I know we're not going to get to all of it. But one of the things I definitely wanted to ask you about, just not necessarily transitioning, but like focusing in on one more specific area that I was intrigued in was the topic of mentorship, as you were talking about. And you've brought it, you've said it a few times, the topic of mentorship. I think it's something that we have an idea of in queer circles, but mentorship has been a very hard thing for us to find in our lives. So I guess, can you just say a little bit more of what you imagine mentorship looks like, maybe in these different stages? Maybe how does it look like in the different stages or just in general?
Well, my there are a lot of different kinds of mentorship. And even I have batted around sometime, what kind of language to use, because in Catholic circles, we use the word accompaniment a lot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And accompaniment meaning as you're walking with someone on their journey to Christ, and beyond their personal relationship with Christ, how you're walking with them on their journey of formation toward Christian perfection. And mentorship is probably the reason why I hesitated so long is because it's so central to why even I've put together these frameworks, because there's the kind of mentorship that priests and pastoral ministers, straight pastoral ministers, can give to gay people, but it's gay and same-sex attracted people ourselves who are often very, very gifted as mentors.
Yeah. Like we need that mentorship from others like us.
Yeah. And so even I tend to use the word mentorship as a more specific term under the heading of accompaniment, where mentorship is gays mentoring gays or LGBT mentoring LGBT. Because there are a few dynamics that are added to the accompaniment. One of them is a toleration. There's a better toleration for the messiness of the self-defense stage. That straight mentors and clergy mentors tend to get really defensive when the person they're mentoring or they're accompanying is in self-defense. And whereas queer mentors are like, yeah.
You're like, oh, honey, I've been there.
Honey, I've known people like you.
I've been you.
So there's that element. There's the Catholic document Humanae Vitae, the 1968 papal encyclical that everybody thinks of as the clamping down on birth control. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful document. If people would just read it.
Yeah. Actually read the document, everyone. It's crazy thought. I said, actually read a document, everyone. Crazy thought instead of summary.
Yeah, those Vatican documents, they get issued and then the hot takes start coming and you never get to the document itself. But buried inside those 1968 hot takes, buried inside the original document, is a paragraph about, okay, when we're talking about natural family planning, those folks who discern correctly, in my opinion, as a Catholic, correctly discern that they should not be using artificial birth control. The Pope Paul VI used the phrase "like ministers to like," that Catholic married couples who use natural family planning can mentor other younger Catholic couples who are learning the ropes. And so same thing goes for LGBT Catholics, is let's get like ministering to like. The wisdom of Humanae Vitae has spun up an entire series of networks of mentors who do this sort of thing. And so I would like to see Building Catholic Futures be one of these networks for training up LGBT Catholics to mentor other LGBT people,
Oh
to
my gosh.
evangelize, to
Yeah.
catechize, to accompany on the road, to form, to make disciples.
It's so needed. It's
Yeah.
just so needed because there's not much of it that out there, like to be able to have in our lives.
No, there's not. In the Catholic world, we have the term of scandal. You know,
Mm.
scandal is a, theological or canonical word, meaning giving the appearance of something that will lead others into sin. And so it's it's a part of Catholic baggage that for the longest time has leaned in the direction of in discouraging gay and lesbian Catholics from being out in their parishes, you know, being too visibly gay, or having any, things like parishes marching in a pride parade.
Yeah.
It might cause scandal because it might lead to confusion among Catholics in the pews that, oh, now the Pope says it's okay to be gay. Well, it is okay to be gay.
Wow. Radical.
But anyway, with respect to mentorship, the reason why gay Catholic mentorship networks haven't grown up as abundantly as they should have is because there's this fear of scandal. Because
Yeah.
honestly, when does mentorship become grooming? This is the fear. And so, this is another part of the work that Building Catholic Futures does is, we talk about some of these harder questions. But asking a question like, when does mentorship become grooming, is really important, but that's something that you talk about in a safe space.
Yeah.
That's not going to translate really well to social media.
Yeah. No, because then it just looks with suspicion on the entire like effort of
Mm-hmm.
mentorship altogether.
Yep.
Like some of those kinds of questions. Um, like they can be worth having and talking about, but within a specific context kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, where do you, I think like one of my like questions I'd love to end on ultimately also, if there's anything, well, I guess before I get to my final question, is there anything that we've like, I want to ask you about where you want to take Building Catholic Futures, but I also want to give you a moment if there's something that that you didn't get to talk about that we should need to talk about.
I want to speed in the direction of
Okay.
of getting more books like yours published, more frameworks like ours published, and the rest of this, because there's these tools and resources are received really, really well. So we need to get the word out.
Yeah. I do think it's what is absolutely needed. It the sides language is important. Like all of these different things are important, but I think sometimes the other frameworks get us away from just integral growth and the holistic kind of whole growth as believers. And I think the frameworks, which we barely touched on, we barely even got to like a little bit of it, is really helpful. And I think, and I think the fact that you have a few different frameworks that you're using, kind of like going back to that diamond analogy, shows the different like facets of it, because it is a multifaceted conversation and it allows for the organic kind of diverse experiences of people, especially within a community like ours that is so diverse and so nuanced in everything. Yeah. Where can people learn about your guys' work, or if they want to do more with you guys? Or I know you mentioned the website before, but
Yep,
just how?
buildingcatholic.org is the website, and get down at the bottom. There's a keep in touch thing where you can fill out your email address and a mobile phone number and all of that, and that'll subscribe you to our periodic newsletter, which we try to get out at least 3-4 times a month, and all
Oh,
of that. But that keeps
amazing.
in touch with mostly with the stuff that we're doing,
Yeah.
so in that. But there's also a contact us page where, in particular, if you're interested in bringing us to your community for anything as intense as a week long exploration of all of these frameworks with plenty of room for discussion back and forth and all of that stuff. We certainly offer that, but we also do a lot of, one of the things we've been doing more of are what we call encounter events, where we get like 6 priests and 6 LGBT discipleship
Ooh.
oriented folks together, sitting around a table and having dinner, and
Wow.
just free flowing discussion. And Eve and I do some light touch facilitation of conversations like that, but it's experiences like that that give people a chance to ask the questions that they wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to ask of one another. And so that, like in the example of priests and LGBT people, it goes both ways. There are all kinds of things. I always wanted to ask a priest, why is it that in confession you blah, 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 you guys tend to blah blah blah, or what have you. But there's also,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, lots of questions for LGBT people, including one we get from folks all the time, which is, why do you stay in the church?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's a really good question to ask, because I've got 100 reasons why I love it here.
Oh my gosh. So I need to have you back on and you can give us your 100 reasons. And then we can go through them.
Very
Because
well.
that's the whole conversation point that I think is really important, that I always come back to, of like, why am I still here? Like, why do I still follow the faith?
Mhm.
So I would love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Y'all, Keith, if you're willing to come back, I'd love for you to come back. Like I said, we had a
Yeah,
really
let's do it.
amazing
We
thing.
we could make it a more regular thing, because there's so
Please.
much. There's so much that your frameworks and my frameworks and Eve's ideas
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes. 100%. But thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. It was, I've been really looking forward to talking with you. And everyone, the information for Building Catholic Futures will be in the show notes. Thank you, as always, for supporting the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Holy Ourselves. Also have the Holy Ourselves Substack newsletter that I am not as good as Building Catholic Futures at getting out. We get it once a month. Once a month,
well,
everyone.
I give Eve credit for it, because
Yeah.
she's such a talented writer. She will whip out
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
a
She
really
writes so much.
yep.
And I'm actually, everyone, I think I mentioned it in the last episode, doing a series on the newsletter on celibate partnerships and discernment and some of these pieces, just given some thoughts from walking with people. So follow there. I've been really glad to see a lot of the enthusiasm about it. So I will be a little bit behind on the newsletter this week, because I literally today got back from Argentina, flew back this morning, and I am back in the United States.
Oh wow.
But thank you, everyone. Thankful for all of you. Thankful for you, Keith. And we will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
All right. Ciao ciao.